Hello, my name is Ruth, and today I'm going to be reading you excerpts from the New Bedford Light. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Our first article is headlined, Mass AG Campbell Sues Trump to Defend Offshore Wind. Massachusetts is suing the Trump administration over what it calls an unlawful attempt to freeze offshore wind development, an energy source the Commonwealth is relying on to meet growing grid demand and decarbonization goals. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell and the top law enforcement officials from more than a dozen states say a presidential memorandum against wind energy projects stymies domestic investment, will jeopardize states' ability to supply enough electricity, and has created a, quote, existential threat to the industry. Campbell filed the lawsuit in Massachusetts federal court with 17 other attorneys general in states that already have offshore or land-based wind projects or plan to develop them. They are asking a federal judge to rule that President Donald Trump's directive is illegal and prevent the administration from taking any action to delay or prevent wind energy development. Massachusetts has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into offshore wind to ensure our residents have access to well-paying green jobs and reliable, affordable energy that helps meet our clean energy and climate goals, said Campbell in a statement Monday. The president's attempt to stop homegrown wind energy development directly contradicts his claims that there is a growing need for reliable domestic energy. The legal challenge comes after Trump, on his first day in office, issued a memorandum barring further leasing and permitting of offshore wind projects and ordering a review of federal permitting practices across all projects. There is no timeline for this review, effectively making the freeze indefinite. Already permitted projects also face a review of their leases. On April 16th, the Interior Department, citing the presidential memorandum, issued a stop work order to a wind project off the New York coast, Empire Wind 1, even though it is fully permitted and approved. Empire Wind 1's developer was moving rocks on the seafloor to create stable bases for turbine foundations and was set to begin pile-driving turbine foundations this month. The move put an even greater chill on the energy sector, including in Massachusetts, where Vineyard Wind remains under construction as opponents continue to call for its shutdown. The attorneys general in a 100-page complaint allege that Trump's directive harms their state's efforts to secure new sources of energy to meet increasing demand for electricity, which experts say is rapidly rising, reduce emissions, and address climate change. They also argue that the abrupt halt on all permitting violates numerous federal laws that prescribe procedures and timelines for how federal agencies may develop and issue regulations. Trump's order directs the Secretary of the Interior to, quote, conduct a comprehensive review of the ecological, economic, and environmental necessity of terminating or amending any existing wind energy leases, identifying any legal basis for such removal, and submit a report with recommendations to the President. It cites environmental and economic concerns, highlighting the commercial fishing industry, birds, and marine mammals, and alleges deficiencies in the permitting and review process. However, while the federal government has criticized the permitting process for wind energy, it is working to fast-track permitting reviews for other energy sectors. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum posted on X, formerly Twitter, last week about reducing 2-year permitting reviews for drilling and mining to 28 days and 1-year reviews to 14 days. These and numerous other executive actions similarly encourage domestic energy development, that is, all but wind and other renewable energy, and also directed agencies to shortcut environmental reviews for other forms of energy, the very same reviews the wind directive labels as inadequate to wind energy, the complaint reads. Per the federal government's permitting dashboard, the agency reviews for Massachusetts wind projects have lasted 2 or 3 years for a given permit. Altogether, the time from lease sale to project construction can last about 10 years. The attorneys general also argue the memorandum threatens investment by wind developers in local workforce and supply chains, which they say has totaled billions of dollars to date. According to the Massachusetts AG's office, wind developers have invested more than $330 million in Massachusetts through workforce development, research, and infrastructure. In New Bedford, the 62-turbine Vineyard Wind project has employed nearly 2,900 people at various lengths of time as of last fall, including union workers, and has helped commercial fishermen supplement their income with safety vessel work. Without certainty and predictable federal processes, experts say, not just the wind industry but other industries are likely to pull back from investment in the United States. Trump's nominee for Assistant Interior Secretary Leslie Beyer conceded this last week during her Senate confirmation hearing, agreeing with Senator Angus King, Democrat of Maine, that the Empire Wind stop work order sends, quote, a dangerous message to energy developers. Renews and other outlets reported. Wind energy is a domestic source of reliable, affordable energy that supports hundreds of thousands of jobs, creates billions of dollars in economic activity and tax payments, and supplies more than 10% of the country's electricity, Campbell's office stated. Her office also warned of impacts a long-term freeze could have on ratepayers. A 2024 study from ISO New England, the operator of the regional power grid, states that without offshore wind, the cost of energy for New England customers is expected to increase by about 50% in 2050. Massachusetts is counting on offshore wind to meet projected grid demand and its climate goals of achieving net zero emissions, meaning the state offsets or removes as much carbon as it emits by 2050. The state has 3 offshore wind projects in various stages of development: Vineyard Wind 1, South Coast Wind, and New England Wind. Together, they would produce 3.1 gigawatts of energy, or enough to power up to 1.4 million homes. Vineyard Wind 1 has installed 32 turbine towers, some without blades, as of mid-April. Because of the blade failure in summer 2024, the developer is removing blades from 22 turbines and replacing them with new ones. The project briefly delivered power for a few months in 2024 and resumed sending power in January 2025 with only 1 turbine. New England Wind, an Avangrid project, is fully permitted and previously expected commercial operations by 2029. But South Coast Wind still requires a key permit from NOAA Fisheries. Both projects plan to use union labor and the Port of New Bedford for long-term operations and maintenance, or offshore construction and staging. Avangrid also plans to open a manufacturing plant in New Bedford, but it's contingent on the project getting built. The state is still finalizing agreements to purchase power from South Coast Wind and New England Wind. The process was set to finalize in March, but it was delayed in large part due to uncertainty created by federal actions. The American Clean Power Association commended the state's action. Quote, with energy demand surging nationwide, it is no surprise that states are actively working to ensure federal actions support rather than hinder reliable power generation, said ACP spokesperson Jason Ryan in an email. A balanced, all-of-the-above energy strategy is essential to meet consumer needs. ACP is working with the administration to clarify the scope and intent of the executive orders related to wind development. New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell, a longtime proponent of offshore wind development, said his position remains that appropriately sited offshore wind projects can succeed without harming the fishing industry. While some sites may require additional scrutiny, projects slated for the Massachusetts wind energy areas should be allowed to proceed as their imposition on the fishing industry is not significant, Mitchell said in a statement. Attorneys general from the following states have joined Massachusetts in challenging the Trump administration's targeting of wind energy. The states are Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, New Mexico, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Washington, and the District of Columbia is also party to the suit. My colleagues and I will continue to challenge this administration's unlawful actions to chill investment and growth of this critical injury, Campbell said on Monday. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, NOAA Fisheries, and the Department of Commerce are also named as defendants. Per an AG spokesperson, the plaintiffs are awaiting the scheduling of a hearing date. The federal government must respond within 21 days of being served with the complaint. Chief Judge F. Dennis Saylor IV has been assigned to the case, court filings show. He was nominated by George W. Bush in 2003 and became Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court of Massachusetts in 2020. Taylor Rogers, White House Assistant Press Secretary, in an email about the lawsuit said that Democratic-led states are using, quote, lawfare. Instead of working with President Trump to unleash American energy and lower prices for American families, Democrat attorneys general are using lawfare to stop the president's popular energy agenda, Rogers said. The American people voted for the president to restore America's energy dominance, and Americans in blue states should not have to pay the price of the Democrats' radical climate agenda. A spokesperson for the Interior Department on Monday said as a matter of policy, the agency does not comment on litigation. The Department of the Interior reaffirms its unwavering commitment to conserving and managing the nation's natural and cultural resources, upholding tribal trust responsibilities and overseeing public lands and waters for the benefit of all Americans, while prioritizing fiscal responsibility for the American people, said J. Elizabeth Peace in an email. The Interior Department has not provided information on the timeline of its mandated review of projects or further details on its stop work order for Empire Wind. When asked what information Interior obtained that, quote, raises serious issues, unquote, regarding the Empire Wind project approval, Peace deferred to NOAA Fisheries, but NOAA Fisheries has not responded to repeated questions on the subject. It doesn't seem to be something that's being done in a public manner at all, said Brian Cravor, Director of Offshore Permitting for Industry Group ACP, at a wind and industry conference last week on a panel about Trump's memorandum. You hear something about an agency sending something that highlights deficiencies and you may never see what it is, he said. You would assume at some point they would have to release something, but there is really no timeline for that. It just seems to be something that is being done in the shadows. Our next article is headlined, Overdoses in City Drop Sharply, Police Numbers Show. Police responded to 25 fatal drug overdoses in 2024, down from 45 in 2023. The woman on the bathroom floor was far gone, the color draining out of her skin and lips, and she was nearly beyond reach. That afternoon last December at the Old Brick School Building office of PAACA, Positive Action Against Chemical Addiction, it took 6 or 7 nasal sprays of Narcan and repeated chest compression to restore her breath. Then she sat up and saw where she was, realized what had happened, and started crying. It was actually the worst overdose I ever dealt with, said Lisa Guillemette, a recovery coach supervisor at PAACA, who revived the woman that Friday afternoon. I had a lot of difficulty getting her back. She was certain that the woman, who was in her 30s or early 40s, would not have survived without the Narcan, a nasal spray used to quickly counteract the effects of opioids. Also known as naloxone, the medication has become commonly available in New Bedford and elsewhere. That's part of the reason why the 2024 New Bedford Police Crime Report shows drug overdoses, both fatal and non-fatal, dropping sharply the last few years, according to city officials and substance abuse treatment practitioners. According to the report, police responded to 39 fatal drug overdoses in 2020. Spiking to a recent peak of 57 in 2022. The number in 2024 was 25, which represents a 56% drop. Police responses to non-fatal overdoses also fell sharply. In the last 5 years, the number peaked at 515 in 2021 and fell steadily to 198 last year. Overdoses in which police are involved do not reflect all overdoses and do not reflect all drug activity. Police Chief Paul Oliveira said the police would not necessarily be called if someone is revived with Narcan. That explains why the non-fatal overdose numbers have fallen so sharply. In fatal overdoses, police would not necessarily be involved if the person is taken straight to a hospital without an ambulance. He said a suspicious death that later turns out to be an overdose also would not be recorded as an overdose by the police. That explains why figures on opioid overdose deaths from the Massachusetts Department of Health do not match the police numbers. In 2023, for instance, the state recorded 76 deaths in New Bedford from opioid overdose alone, while the police responded to 45 overdose deaths. The drop in the police numbers is striking enough, though that practitioners figure it indicates more effective approaches to reducing the harm of substance abuse. It may also indicate less drug use overall, but that is harder to pin down. Carl Alvarez, CEO of PAACA, said, quote, "It's happening on a national level. I think it's in large part harm reduction activities. There is a big push to have Narcan more available." Our next article is headlined, "Lawmakers Want Answers on South Coast Rail Disruptions." A state Senate committee has opened an inquiry into delayed and canceled trains on the new South Coast rail line. Disruptions have frustrated riders since the MBTA extension opened on March 24th, including several canceled trains the weekend of April 19th and 20th. Keolis, the company that runs commuter trains under a contract with the MBTA, has said that it canceled trains because it doesn't have enough staff trained on the new tracks. Some riders say they were stranded for hours. The Senate Committee on Post-Audit and Oversight sent a detailed list of questions to the MBTA last week, asking for information about staffing and cancellations. Stranding passengers late into the evening hours is an unacceptable error that presents a potential safety issue for older riders, young children, and those with medical conditions, in addition to the obvious inconvenience inflicted upon all passengers, wrote State Senator Mark Montigny, who chairs the committee in a letter to the MBTA General Manager Philip Eng. Montigny declined to be interviewed about the inquiry because it is ongoing. A representative for his office wrote in a text to the Light that they would provide more information at a later date. The Senate committee currently has no hearings scheduled. Keolis spokesperson Jake O'Neill did not answer repeated phone calls from the Light this week. Train conductors and engineers need to be qualified to work on specific lines, O'Neill wrote in an email on Tuesday. Trains were canceled because there haven't always been enough crews trained on the new South Coast rail tracks to cover for workers who called out sick or missed their shift. Keolis said that it is training more staff. It has 54 conductors currently qualified for South Coast Rail and a plan to raise that number to 65 by early June, O'Neill said. MBTA spokesperson Joe Pesaturo declined to make any agency officials available for interviews. In an email, he referred the Light to Eng's comments at last Thursday's MBTA board meeting, when Eng said that Keolis officials had communicated to the T before the extension opened that, quote, they were ready to deliver this level of service, unquote. Keolis replaced some trains with buses the weekend of April 19th, 20th. It planned to do that again this past weekend, but it found enough crews at the last minute to run trains as scheduled, O'Neill said. The MBTA has fined Keolis $51,541 for the disruptions, State House News Service reported. The MBTA is extending weekend free fares for South Coast riders through the end of May as a show of gratitude to riders who have been utilizing this new service. The promotion was originally planned to end in April. The staffing shortages are disappointing to transit advocates who have watched the project stumble through decades of delays. Why wasn't this thought of and prepared for, asked Reggie Ramos, executive director of the advocacy group Transportation for Massachusetts. She wanted a fuller explanation from Keolis on how the shortages happened and what the company was doing to mitigate them. Ramos said launching the project 2 months early may have contributed to the staffing shortages, leaving less time for Keolis to train enough workers. Earlier this year, the MBTA moved up the opening date from May to March. The disruptions rob riders of dignity and discourage ridership on public transport as a whole, Ramos said. South Coast Rail is a really pivotal first step to reconnecting those South Coast communities that haven't been served by rail for so long, said Janet Chung, a program assistant at the advocacy group Transit Matters. Obviously, this hasn't instilled the greatest confidence in riders. Chung said these early missteps could make it harder to bring more train service to the South Coast in the future. The MBTA has a long-term plan to bring faster electrified train service to New Bedford and Fall River in the 2030s. In a statement provided by New Bedford's Public Information Officer, Mayor John Mitchell said riders should be able to count on reliable train service. He said it's important for Keolis and the MBTA to resolve the issue because, quote, we are in a critical window in which public perception of the service is still developing, unquote. Paul Chase, a local realtor and leader of the Rail to Boston Coalition, spent years pressing the state to make South Coast Rail a reality. He said his group is prepared to advocate to make sure the project delivers on its promises. It took a long time to get here, and hopefully it only takes a little time to work it out, he said. Our next article is headlined, New Bedford Crime Down in Most Major Categories in 2024. Violent crime, property crime, and drug overdoses are on the decline, with the exception of a spate of homicides last August, but shots fired are on the rise. Crime in the city has fallen or remained level in most categories, with the exception of one unusually violent month last summer, according to the newly released New Bedford Police Department's 2024 crime report. The 4 homicides in August alone equaled the number of killings in the city for each of the previous 4 years, and raised the 2024 homicide number to 7. Otherwise, crime was down or about level across the board, led by sharp drops in robbery, aggravated assault, and burglary. The improvement is particularly striking in light of crime 10 years ago. According to the report, violent crime, murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, dropped from 1,014 incidents in 2015 to 406 last year, a 60% decline. Property crime, arson, burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft dropped from 3,211 incidents in 2015 to 1,546 last year, a 52% drop. Larceny is defined as stealing property and includes shoplifting, purse snatching, and theft from a building, car, or vending machine. Drug overdoses, both fatal and non-fatal, are also down sharply in the last few years. Drug treatment practitioners say this is probably due to the number of harm reduction approaches for substance abusers and the greater availability of Narcan, a drug used to reverse the effects of opioid overdose. However, the last 5 years have also seen increases in incidents of gunshots fired, simple assault, and motor vehicle theft. In a news release, Chief Paul Oliveira, who is retiring, said that the progress shown in the report results from, quote, focused enforcement, strong community partnerships, and a shared commitment to a safer New Bedford. In an interview, Oliveira attributed much of the improvement to better use of information. He said the department, which just hired a second statistics analyst, gathers more information about where crime is occurring as it's happening, looks at patterns, and uses that data to direct law enforcement. We've gotten better to get those numbers out to officers to know where to be and when to be there, Oliveira said. For instance, information on stolen cars might be flagged for attention, as stolen cars are often used in other crimes, particularly shootings, Oliveira said. A person released from jail or prison and known to the police might be flagged as a potential crime risk. The report brings good news for a police department that was shown in bad light in March and April by the Boston Globe Spotlights team, Snitch City, a series of stories and podcasts on abuses of confidential informants in narcotics investigations that put particular focus on Oliveira's work as a narcotics detective decades ago. The department has challenged some of the reporting, including questioning the reliability of the newspaper's sources. Still, in response, Mayor John Mitchell in March named 21 CPS Solutions, a public safety consultant, to investigate the New Bedford Police Department's Narcotics and Internal Affairs divisions and report back in about 3 months. Mitchell has also hired Michael Burkow, former head of Internal Affairs for the Los Angeles Police Department, to review the Globe's reporting, quote, so that no area in need of improvement is missed, unquote, adding that Burkow's findings would be publicized. Mitchell said he also forwarded the Globe series to the FBI. In a written statement, Mitchell said the crime report is, quote, hard evidence that the men and women of the police department are getting the job done for our residents. It is also an affirmation of the department's expanded use of data analysis to get a step ahead of evolving public safety threats, and it confirms the value of the ongoing push to modernize policing practices. Shots fired have risen at least since 2020 from 45 that year to 67 in 2023, 68 last year, a difference of 51%. The report shows that of the 68 incidents of gunfire, 42 resulted in property damage only, 14 in injuries, and 3 deaths. Oliveira said the rising number of gunshots fired could be tied to a couple of main factors: more untraceable or ghost guns on the street, and the fact that juveniles are usually the ones shooting the guns. It's very tough to keep juvenile offenders off the streets, he said. As the juvenile court system works, it's very difficult to get juveniles locked up. Juvenile crime explains most increases in crime that you're seeing right now, he said, and we have seen that for some time. 2 of the 3 fatal shootings were among the 4 killings in August. There was no pattern to the homicides and no connection among them. In the first, Aaron Brito, 44, was found shot to death early on Sunday morning, August 4th, on Earl Street. Anthony Jallo, 21, was later arrested and charged with shooting Brito and taking a chain that he was wearing. On August 17th, Nicholas Miller, 26, was found shot outside a bar on County Street. Published reports said that he and the accused shooter, Raymond Albury, 27, of Weymouth, were acquaintances. On October 20th, Stephen Oswald, 58, a man described in police reports as homeless, was found lying on a bench in Zebra Plaza on Rockdale Avenue after he had been kicked and stomped. Nina Bosnego, 31, who was last living in Mattapoisett, was charged in the crime. On October 24th, a family argument led to the fatal stabbing of Omil Padilla Corsino, 23, in an apartment on South Street. His uncle, Juan Padilla Santana, 42, of Puerto Rico, was charged in the killing. Arrests were also made in a fatal shooting in April on Austin Street and in stabbings on Atlantic Street in September and Acushnet Avenue in October. Compared with 2 comparably sized cities in this part of the state, New Bedford looks safer from violence, but not property crime. Figures for Brockton and Fall River are not yet available for 2024, but the 2023 numbers show that the rate of violent crime per 10,000 residents was lower in New Bedford. The 2023 violent crime rate was 49 per 10,000 residents in New Bedford, 66 in Brockton, and 84 in Fall River. The property crime rate was 158 per 10,000 in New Bedford in 2023, 125 in Brockton, and 139 in Fall River. New Bedford's population in 2023 was nearly 101,000, Brockton about 106,000, and Fall River about 94,000. While the New Bedford report shows crime in most categories declining since 2015, there have been fluctuations from one year to the next. Sexual assault rose from 88 incidents in 2020 to 120 in 2022, and then dropped to 98 in 2024. Robbery dropped from 108 in 2020 to 86 in 2021, rose to 112 in 2022, and fell back to 86 last year. Aggravated assaults rose from 382 to 429 in 2020 and have since dropped sharply. 3 exceptions to falling crime in the last 5 years are incidents of gunshots fired, simple assault, and motor vehicle theft. And that brings us to the end of our reading for today. Thank you so much for listening.